The outside world underestimates how badly the Chinese economy is performing. That's according to one entrepreneur who's been doing business in China for 3 decades. And today I'm going to ask the question, is this the end of China? There are those who say that China will be the world's next great superpower and it's going to take over the world. There are others who say that China's demographic crisis is a ticking time bomb and that the country is too old. And no doubt, many of the countries in East Asia, led by Japan and secondarily Korea, are indeed older than most of the world. But here's what the insider in China says. Employees in companies are stealing because things aren't improving. The economy is not growing for them, and they've basically given up on what was once a strong bull economy. He says people in the country aren't optimistic. They've even stopped buying staples like milk as more dairy companies turn to making things like powdered milk. And he says foreign companies are packing up shop, disillusioned with the once great opportunity about China. Now, I read the book over a decade ago called The $10 Trillion Prize, which said how China and India would totally transform how we do business in the world. India is much more talked about now as not only the world's most populous country, but a country that's much younger and growing much more quickly, and which has a lot of opportunity. From the entrepreneur, it's hard for U.S. businesses to operate in China, and many foreign businesses are simply packing up. Now, from the Nomad Capitalist perspective, if you're a U.S. citizen, if you're a U.S. business, it's harder to operate anywhere in the world, but especially in China, and I'll tell you why in a minute. It is harder as a U.S. citizen or a U.S. citizen who owns a company, thanks to things like FATCA, which controls how you bank overseas, things like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which control how you run your business overseas. All kinds of sanction lists and regulations that you have to follow as a U.S. citizen that many other countries don't apply on their citizens who go to live overseas. And so for Americans, it's always harder to run a business, especially in Asia, but really anywhere else in the world. That's something that Nomad Capitalist helps our American clients figure out when they move to more tax-friendly countries, and they want to make sure they're staying in legal compliance. Now, let me share with you a New York Times article about Desmond Shum. He was one of China's most well-connected businessmen, and he and his former wife, Duan Weihong, used their relationships with top government officials to build a multi-billion-dollar property development company during a golden age for entrepreneurs starting in the mid-90s. And now, as tensions with the West dominate the discussion, with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen sharply criticizing China's treatment of American companies on a trip to Beijing. And Mr. Shum left China in 2015 as Xi Jinping, the country's leader, asserted greater state control over the country and its businesses. And his wife disappeared 2 years later. It was believed that the Communist Party officials detained her after a high-ranking political ally was held on suspicion of corruption. Now, you may say this story all sounds a little shady, but what the article goes on to say is this is happening to entrepreneurs of all stripes who are coming to China and basically finding that China is focusing more on Chinese companies, Western companies are no longer as welcome, and basically they're just feeling like this may not be the place for them. This is one reason, by the way, why I believe having a more innocuous passport as part of your passport portfolio is important. Now, one thing the article doesn't talk about is how the U.S. State Department recently issued a travel warning for Americans against going to China, saying that Americans may just be held against their will for no reason at all as some sort of political retaliation. And what I told you back a couple of years ago is when the Trump administration discussed forcing TikTok to sell to like Walmart, the idea was that China would then retaliate in a tit-for-tat fashion, and it would make it very difficult for U.S. citizens and Chinese citizens to do business in each other's countries and kind of start this basically trade war that's been talked about. And so if you can be St. Lucian, or if you can be Dominican, or if you can go back through your family tree and get your Irish citizenship, for example, or if you want to move overseas and get citizenship in some other country that's much less in the fray of all this stuff, that's probably going to be easier for doing business going forward. It used to be 3 decades ago when these folks started doing business in China, the American passport was one of the best in the world. You still had these restrictions, but there weren't that many other countries that you'd want to live in. There weren't that many other passports that had the might that the U.S. passport did. Now the situation has reversed, and I'd much rather be doing business as a St. Lucian which I am through their citizenship by investment program, than I would be through an American, which I ultimately gave up. Because just not only the regulations, but the perception when you go to start a business in another country, and I think this may spread to more countries that are outside of the Western world, where a lot of the opportunities are, where the countries are sometimes growing 5 or 10 times faster than Western counterparts. If you want to be involved in that, even just as a passive investor, as we saw in Russia in 2022, having a passport that is not tied to the US or the UK might not be the worst thing to do. Now, this may not be good for China, the fact that their economy is going to be growing more slowly, the fact that they have these demographic issues that are talked about, but it is no relief for the West. And what I commonly see is people watching this in Western countries saying, okay, we thought there was a China threat, we see them becoming increasingly something that we don't want them to be, but it's not going to last. And they kind of breathe a sigh of relief. However, we are moving closer towards a multipolar world, where it is not just the US running the show, along with its Western allies, where there are different factions. We've talked, for example, about the US is losing, the US dollar losing status as the world reserve currency. It's still there, but the percentages aren't quite as high. It's the frog in the boiling pot. Every year a little chunk falls off. And people say, well, what's going to replace it? And my answer is a lot of things. I'm seeing more people say that now in articles that I read. But whichever country takes over from any position that China were to lose, it's not going to be as Western friendly. Take India, which I mentioned as the second country discussed in that book, The $10 Trillion Prize. India, for example, is firmly on the other side of the Russia-Ukraine war than the West. They are very much pro-Russia as part of the BRICS. They always have been, and so they are becoming increasingly important. Countries like Indonesia, for example, huge population, growing economy, not without problems, but it is estimated to be one of the 15 largest economies in just the next several years. They may not have a position in that war, but they're not going to be as pro-West. And so what we're seeing again, if you have a very Western passport where perhaps there's a perception of, oh, they're the ones who control the world's economy and we're tired of being under their thumb, where the perception is we're tired of their wars, that's going to, I think, leave you at a disadvantage. And again, particularly for starting a business, we run a business, and yes, we help American clients, we help Canadians, we help Australians, we help Germans, but we help people from anywhere in the world. And in our business, the tremendous growth opportunities are in countries that most Westerners have never heard of. You've got people in our business opening up offices in Cambodia, in places in West Africa, in South America. And so you want to be doing business in places where the economy is growing 5 to 10 times faster than the Western counterparts. People are increasingly entering the middle class. We're even seeing a much bigger boom in the middle class in Africa now. Those countries are not going to be as friendly to the West. Now, it's worth noting, if you're hearing this and saying, you know what, it'd be nice to have a backup plan. Let me have a second passport somewhere else that is a bit more under the radar. Not because I'm doing anything wrong, but because the world is becoming more multipolar. Maybe I want to have some money in another country. I want to have investments. I want to buy stocks. I need a brokerage account. I want a bank account. Whatever you may need, there's many different strategies you can use to diversify to not only potentially earn higher returns, earn higher yields on real estate, enjoy some asset protection, diversify into different currencies, different countries. That to me is going to be good, especially as these Western countries are getting a little more grabby with your assets. Have something that's diversified. You can legally do that. It's what we help our clients do. And unlike the firms that are opening up offices in different places that might sell one product like citizenship, our focus is creating a bespoke plan for you of saying, what are your objectives and here's the things that you need to do. Someone with $1 million might want a bank account in Switzerland. Someone with $10,000 who wants to build a tunnel for their money might want a bank account in Georgia. And there's many other points in between. You may not need any bank accounts at all. You may need a passport, but not a residence permit. That's what we help people figure out. Go to nomadcapitalist.com, because just because China may not succeed the same way everyone thought they were going to, it doesn't mean that your country is going to become any more free or that it's going to maintain its relevance anymore. Because if there's one thing we believe here, it is that, yes, the US will always be relevant. The West and Europe and all that will always be relevant, but it will be less relevant than it is today. opportunities for more freedom, more profitability will be, in many cases, in other places. You don't want to miss out on that. We're seeing, by the way, India and the UAE now saying, let's settle trade in rupees. You're seeing more and more countries doing that. And so what the article that I shared with you from the New York Times went on to say is the entrepreneur who says China is not doing well, the proper term is reglobalization minus China. So during COVID, people said, okay, this means deglobalization. COVID plus kind of the nationalistic politics in many countries around the world. Hey, globalism is over. People are just going to stay in their own countries, made in the USA. What they're saying is, no, reglobalization minus China. Like if you buy an Asian stock, it's Asia x Japan. Forget Japan, although Japan's been doing very well this year. And so, as I said, you won't have one country replacing China. But you see operations for years now been moving to Vietnam. They've been moving to Bangladesh. They're moving to Sri Lanka. Maybe that's been a little bit tougher, but again, a case for diversification recently. Indonesia, India, even Pakistan. I mean, I'm seeing people all over the place. We've had a number of clients starting about 3 or 4 years ago that were hiring very talented English-speaking people in Pakistan. Some of them had half of their staff there. Obviously, we've had success in smaller countries, and while our staff is much more diversified and more Western than it's ever been, we have historically hired a number of folks in countries like Serbia where English is excellent. There's more of a work ethic. There's more of a population that's open to work because there haven't been as many opportunities. And so China is now being aced out in many circles from that. Look at how many Taiwanese manufacturers are growing. Look at how many Taiwanese manufacturers are moving to countries like Mexico. Look at everything that's happening in Mexico, with so many things being made and being assembled there, the maquiladoras. And then, of course, as the article says, you have friend-shoring to friendly countries and also near-shoring. I was just talking to someone the other day who has a company where they help you move your staff to Colombia, for example, where we have a base, and you can save 70 cents on the dollar. And that's something that most people don't understand about our business is we hire very, very talented people with great educations, and we teach them our very unique approach that I don't think almost any other company does. And we do so much more affordably than if we had our offices in Zurich or in London or in New York. And quite frankly, I think we get more productivity from many of those folks. And so China is being aced out, so these entrepreneurs say, from that system. One of the things that I think you can do, let's talk about what you can do to benefit from this, to thrive, but also to survive. I think Mexico, especially if you're North American, is a place where you want to plant a flag. I'm not saying to move all your money to Mexico, but I am saying you can get a residence permit. It's very straightforward. You can work towards citizenship. You don't even have to move right away. You will need to live in Mexico at some point if you want to get citizenship. Get Mexican residence as an option. It's something that we help our clients do as part of a larger plan. But get Mexican residence because I believe that as the U.S. is just a little bit less relevant every year, Mexico is going to see it as that, and they're going to be doing more and better deals with countries around the world, as well as continuing to sell into the United States. I think having Mexican citizenship in future years for you and for your family would be an excellent diversification play because it's right next door. It's culturally very similar. Many folks have moved to Mexico from the US and Canada in the last couple of years, as we've recommended, and they're finding out it's not that dissimilar. However, I do believe that the politics are going to be a bit more agnostic to the Western world, and having a great quality passport, which Mexico offers. Really the only countries that Mexicans can't go to without a visa is the US and Australia. Otherwise, it's a top travel document around the world. That's a nice option to have because you're seeing more and more of this globalization happening in Mexico, and being close to that wouldn't be the worst plan B. I would also look at how do I get an international brokerage account where I can trade stocks around the world. Now, some of the places where we're talking about, India, for example, if you look at Interactive Brokers, you're supposed to be an Indian resident, I believe, to trade Indian stocks. But you can get a bank account in, let's say, a country like Singapore, and they will have baskets of Indian stocks that you can buy. Americans are going to have a harder time doing that in Singapore, but for anybody else, get a bank account in kind of the wealth hub of the region. We always talk about that. What's the wealth hub of the region? Hong Kong is starting to come back a little bit in Asia, but I think Singapore is really the wealth hub in Asia. And you can get baskets of stocks for India, for Indonesia, in Thailand. Those are harder markets to access through even an international brokerage account. Malaysia, for example, because it's a closed currency. You know, if there's a particular market you're interested in, get a residence permit in that country. You can buy stocks there. But having an international brokerage account and an international bank account that facilitates your being able to invest not in some ETF with high fees and that isn't really capturing the true potential of the country, but it's something that's managed locally, have a brokerage, have a bank account, people to participate in these countries that you probably haven't thought about before, and then have some foreign currencies. Obviously, the Indian rupee, for example, has not performed that well, so we're not suggesting to have that. And we're not suggesting that you particularly make any investments. I'm just telling you what I think I've done and what's worthwhile considering. If you have that same international bank account in Singapore, you could potentially hold 12 or 13 different currencies. If you have bank accounts in Switzerland or Liechtenstein or even the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands, you can hold multiple different currencies from all around the world and to be diversified. Because the idea here is, yes, China may not be as relevant in 20 years. It will still be relevant, the same way the EU will be relevant, the US will be relevant, but it will not perhaps have the overreaching success that people thought it would. There will be no one place that replaces any of these places. 20 years ago, one of the top places to move, if you were in the know, was Singapore. Now, Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia, even Vietnam are all coming up as destinations. It's almost too late to go to Singapore. You need a lot of money to immigrate to Singapore under most conditions these days. And in the same way that you've created this multipolarity in terms of immigration options, you'll have the same with currencies, and you'll have the same with countries geopolitically. There will not just be one replacement for the dollar. You want to have diversified options. It's what Nomad Capitalist preaches. It's what we help our clients do. Again, bank account, brokerage account, residence, citizenship. If you put those in different corners of the world, obviously the bank and brokerage facilitates investment in different parts of the world. You can take advantage of the places like Mexico, like Indonesia, all these places, and you can invest. And I think that's something that everyone should very strongly consider doing, rather than breathing a sigh of relief that China may be a little bit less relevant.